The wind companies come in to these small communities and they wine and dine the local officials, and they look at us as backwoodsy hayseeds, farmers who know nothing, who think they can schmooze us with all their fancy talk and, you know, and say everything's going to be fine, and it's not.
Once you sign that contract, they give you some money. You can't speak out against them. You can't speak out. You know, if you do, they'll come after you.
People have been real hesitant to talk about what they've experienced because I feel the wind companies are intimidating. They are intimidating individuals. They come in and they are so powerful, and they make the local people feel so I think insubordinate. And they have an answer for everything.
They said they were going to have 300, 400 construction workers here, and they were going to hire locally, and they were going to, you know, they projected, and they sure give you the rosy picture. You know, they told you everything to make you feel warm and fuzzy, so that that they could get the project in here, get it started, get it going. Once they did that, then of course they brought their own people in and did what they wanted to do.
The Blacktop Road was held up for 3 years prior. It was going to pieces, but it was still something a lot more passable than what it is now. And then this spring, before the project started, they set a man on the tailgate with a camera, and they filmed the whole road. The windmill company people did, and I stopped them out here. I says, "Why are you filming the road?" "Well, we want to prove that this road was already destroyed before we got on it." I says, "Well, if you're going to use this road that they've held up repairing because you guys might come," I said, "now you're saying that you want film proof." I said, "Why would you need that if you intend to put a decent road back when you're done?" And he wouldn't look at me.
I think something that I would like for you to think is that for those families that live there every day, day in, day out, they will be getting up and looking at these really, really big towering structures. There is no way to soften the visual impact of these massive structures. Big turbines also has been recorded to be pretty distracting for drivers, and a number of fatal accidents have been blamed on them. Some people have referred to us as maybe people who didn't want those in our backyard, and that's true. But you know, when I look at this, in my opinion, and maybe you will agree, this is going to be in all of our backyards. There's no doubt. At 400 feet, these towers will dominate our landscape and diminish the stature of all of our local landmarks. The massive visual impact that we're seeing here of this industrial development is one reason I oppose this location for the project being so close to Hayes.
People that were going to come up here, I think, to build, you know, maybe have a camper up here, they're not going to want them anywhere near the windmills. They'd be back in the woods, probably, anywhere away from the windmills.
I was blown away when I came up here and I saw the fact that, you know, I mean, these windmills have taken away from the landscape of this area and limited, you know, the real estate value.
Developers of industrial wind energy projects will all say that property values do not decline when their turbines are installed. They like to cite one particular study that assessed property taxes before and after development and concluded that property values remained unchanged because taxes did not go down. The data on home sales tell a very different story. Estimates from around the world suggest that properties in proximity to turbines lose 25% to 40% of their value. The scenery around a property is a very important component of its value. It seems strange that the same zoning regulations that limit residential structures to 2.5 stories would allow towers 40 stories high just 1,000 feet away from people's homes.
The first thing you realize when you start selling real estate is that value is determined by numerous factors. Location, size, but certainly in our market, the one factor that stands out the most is going to be views, whether it be lake views or valley views, but certainly mountain views that go for miles and miles.
Also remember that the value of a property and its saleability are two entirely different things. While the view of turbines will reduce property values, the noise they produce will make some properties impossible to sell. A lot of people may decide to move if this project goes forward. The question is, will they be able to sell their homes? Maybe they will, but they are going to lose some money. We should remember that we are talking about people's homes here, in most cases, the biggest investment a family has.
These deeds reflect amendments that basically are set up to hold the wind companies harmless from noise issues, from view restrictions. These are the same nuisances that we hear the wind companies say that will never happen. So they're placing these amendments to a deed for something they say never occurs. Two specific cases here in these deeds, one property sold through the fire sale 80% less than the fair market value, and in the second deed was a little over 50% less than the fair market value. So to say, does it appear that the presence of wind turbines are going to affect property values? Absolutely.
I'm projecting that there may be an adverse economic effect on property marketability for those which don't have windmills on their properties.
People that were specifically interested in purchasing property that were within the view shed or a targeted piece of property never got to the stage where they were interested in making so much as an offer. Once they understood that the possibility of the wind turbines might exist there, they didn't have any further interest in that area.
Sure, a few families will generate some income from this industrial development, but what about the permanent reduction in property values for the rest of the county? Is this the kind of growth we really want?
It isn't hard to imagine what could happen to wind turbines 400 feet tall in our weather. We live with tornadoes every year, but these things have to shut down when the wind reaches 55 miles per hour. We don't need a new source of fires so close to people's homes, especially fires that can only be fought with helicopters. We had an ice storm this New Year's. Sheets of ice the size of cars were falling off these blades.
And liability means who is responsible for anything that goes wrong or any problems that might develop. In this case, liability must be shared somehow among three parties with various degrees of vested interest. The corporation that installs and operates the machinery, the landowners who lease their land for the project, and the government that grants permission for the project. But if we have any problems with these windmills, we can just sue our neighbors that hosted them, because the leasing agreements they sign in all likelihood render them fully responsible for any third-party liability, whether they realize it or not. But that isn't what worries me as much as the community liability. Typically, a bond of $1 million per tower is posted by the company and held by the county. In the absence of such a bond, this community assumes a $140 million liability. And if the leaseholders ever get tired of these things in their property and decide to hold the county responsible for their removal, all of us might just have to pay for it. And be aware, if the county gives permission to do this, we will have no one to turn to should anything go wrong. There are no federal or state regulations or statutes defining the responsibilities of companies developing industrial wind power projects. And that is truly astonishing.
I lived 10 years in Alaska, and Kotzebue had a wind farm like this, and they didn't last but 8 years, and they were blown to the ground and destroyed, and now they're just all laid there as wrecks. I would really like to know how long these are going to go. You know, they're not going to last forever, and what are they going to do with them when they're wrecked? Just leave them? Walk away from them?
Wind power on this large of a scale hasn't been around that long, but already doctors are asking some serious questions about the health impacts when located in populated areas. There are no long-term studies yet, but many people seem to develop a lot of new health complaints around industrial wind energy developments.
Right after the turbines had been put in and they had been turned on and they were creating this amount of noise, I could not sleep. I was losing sleep. It was affecting me at work. I was going to work. I was being grouchy. You know, I would get maybe 1-2 hours of sleep per night. I just couldn't take it anymore. So I went to the doctor. The doctor prescribed a medication for me. The doctor told me that I needed to be careful taking it because sleep medication is addictive. So that's not, you know, I don't want to be addicted to a medication. But at the same time, I need to get my sleep. So I'm kind of caught, you know, I'm kind of caught in the middle. What do I do?
In Europe, they've had a much more long-term experience with wind turbines and their effects on health. The French Academy of Medicine has been able to document how the noises can directly impact health. In medical terms, a syndrome is a collection of symptoms that are consistent from person to person. With regard to wind turbine syndrome, people living in industrial wind developments are a bit like guinea pigs in a large, unregulated medical experiment. The visual disturbances caused by the massive rotating blades, commonly referred to as flicker or strobing, can also have a dangerous and very detrimental psychological impact.
When turning with the sun behind them, turbine blades cast moving shadows across the landscape and houses, creating a strobe effect within houses that can be difficult to block out. Some people get dizzy, lose their balance, or become nauseated. People most likely to be susceptible to symptoms include those with migraine disorder, those with age-related problems with inner ear function, and children with disabilities, especially autism. The strobe effect also has the potential to trigger seizures in people with epilepsy.
I will emphasize that the recognition of these potential health hazards are to prevent its inappropriate placement close to populated areas. One reason I oppose this wind energy project is because it's far too close to many families whose health will be negatively affected. Thank you.
Will these wind towers make noise? A common question found on the UPC website, which answers that virtually no mechanical noise from these turbines can be heard. If you are near a turbine, you may hear the sound of the wind and the swooshing sound made by the slowly turning blade parting the air. If the wind is blowing, the background noise of the wind in the trees is all you are likely to hear. You will not be able to hear any noise at all at the foot of the mountain.
You can hear them. I mean, I can hear them here on some days. There's no use denying that.
Between 2003 and 2005, 4 families built new homes at the base of Mars Hill with assurance that these wind turbines would not be heard.
My dad was pretty tight with the money. When these windmills came in, he thought it was a lot of money to be getting to have these things on his property. But now that he's got them there, he's not so happy about them. He does not like the noise at all. He says, I never dreamed they were going to make this much noise.
I operate my parents' farm, which is located between 3,000 and 4,000 feet away from the Meyersdale wind power plant. I work construction, and I kind of have grown accustomed to loud noises. Unfortunately, this is a noise that I haven't grown accustomed to, and I can't seem to get out of my mind when I'm there. I kind of equate it to a heavy wind or a storm coming over the mountaintop, or a jet taking off.
The wind turbines will be about 45 decibels at a distance of a half mile. I certainly don't want to go to bed at night with the sound of a vacuum cleaner in our bedroom.
In my house, you can hear the turbines running. They make a lot of noise. At nighttime, when you lay down to sleep, if you don't get to sleep right away, after everything kind of settles down in the night, you'll hear like the thud noise of the turbines, the blades turning, and it's kind of a drone sound. It's a constant sound. It's like thud, thud, thud.
It's kind of a whooshing or a thud sound. It's a constant whoosh, whoosh, whoosh inside our homes.
It's astounding how much noise they actually do make.
The irritant factor of noise is very much a function of its duration. A noise that produces no irritation for a few minutes can have serious health impacts when it continues incessantly for hours or days at a time.
From what I've heard and knowing the people that are there, they have a concern, and a very legitimate concern. They have a noise problem.
When the alarm went off this morning, you could hear them, as loud as the music was on the radio. Mostly they seem to be worse at night, and I'll get up, take medication, and you could go back to bed. The only comfort you get is if you can fall right back to sleep, which was never a problem. And now I can't get back to sleep because you hear the boom, 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 like sneakers in a dryer, or you hear the humming steady, like a motor running, boom, 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 and it works in your nerves.
A mechanical hum is all you may hear when you stand below a tower, though additional grinding sounds may occur when turbines are shifted to face into the direction of the wind. But it is the aerodynamic noise that is far more problematic because it is produced over a wide range of frequencies, from high frequency whoosh whoosh sounds to very low frequency vibrations, now commonly described as blade thump. Noises that can travel 2 miles or more depending on the direction of the wind. Because they are low-frequency sounds, they also travel through the ground and penetrate buildings very well. Some of these low-frequency vibrations are so low that we cannot actually hear them, though they do affect us. I have no doubt that many families who presently assume they live at a safe distance from this project will be negatively impacted by the noise from the wind turbines. Noise pollution and its human health impact is one reason I oppose this industrial development in its present location.
Shadow come right through my yard from that one when the sun got behind it. It's a very annoying shadow.
This is a place where I grew up, and I have been hunting all my life. It's a place where I had planned to hunt for the rest of my life. This is a place that we're probably never going to be able to hunt and enjoy like we have probably for the rest of our life.
Wind developers like to show slides of cows grazing right up to the bases of their turbines. But in fact, cattle can suffer health problems from chronic exposure, very similar to humans. Horses are even more sensitive.
And you don't see any more wildlife. And that was one thing we got a big kick out of. Like, we'd go down the street down here just for a ride when we were building. And one day I counted 17 moose. I haven't seen one since those windmills went in. We don't see birds.
There are various ways that turbines disturb birds. Apart from collisions, birds may waste energy trying to avoid them on a regular basis, and this can reduce their breeding success and foraging efficiency. When resident hawks and owls begin avoiding wind turbines, rodent populations around them increase because they are released from the control of these predators, and the whole ecology begins to change. Even bird species at low risk for collisions can be deterred from nesting or roosting in their normal habitats by unnatural noises and disturbances. For us hunters, will we find all those pheasants that we have right now?
There's quite a few turkey hunters up here, and I haven't seen a turkey around here nowhere since these things have turned. Deer, I've seen a few deer, but nothing like I used to see. They used to always be out in the field here behind the house.
The deer population on the land that we were hunting on probably was cut in half.
We used to come home and the car lights would pick up shiny eyes out in the field, and a deer would pop up. It was laying down for the night. You don't see that. We haven't seen any wildlife whatsoever.
How much of them wind farms come from a private sector? It's all federally funded and locally funded. It's out of their pocket. It's very little, and it's terrible.
It is true wind is a free source of renewable energy, but harvesting it turns out to be pretty expensive. It takes 7 years of full capacity operation to recover the carbon released during the construction of each turbine. These things rarely produce more than 1/4 to 1/3 their full capacity and are fully depreciated after 6 years. They don't run on wind, they run on taxes. Because the power output of wind turbines is so variable and intermediate, backup generations from a reliable source must remain online. This actually increases our dependency on coal and other power sources and reduces the efficiency of these plants because their output must be constantly raised and lowered to compensate for variable output from wind turbines. Because it is unreliable, wind power has no capacity factor. It cannot replace any other type of energy plant because it cannot be counted on to displace any load at any time. The idea that wind power can reduce our dependence on foreign oil is a misconception. Most of our power in the U.S. comes from burning coal, and we still have a 200-year supply of that within our own borders. The small amount of oil burned to generate electricity is mostly low-grade domestic production. So until you can hook your car up to one of these things, they aren't going to reduce our thirst for petroleum. Another problem is that wind power is typically not there when you need it. At times of peak demand in the morning and evening when the wind is not blowing, in August when it's 105 and there's no air. Most of us own some kind of real estate or would like to, and if you put any value on land, that should be considered a very big cost in the production of this electricity, especially if the land becomes badly damaged or unsuitable for other uses. As an electrician, I wouldn't want to depend on wind power as a source of energy. I don't want to see our whole neighborhood trashed for a few megawatts of intermediate power. If wind power is going to make a contribution, it needs to be done in an area where not so many of my neighbors are affected adversely.
Economics is all about money. Who makes it, how they spend it. It is also about cost, recovering that cost, and making profit. This deal is simply a deceptive transfer of millions of dollars from the pockets of us, ordinary taxpayers, electric customers to a wealthy wind farm corporation and a few privileged landowners. This money is hidden in the forms of subsidies and also tax avoidance. The fact is, if the government wasn't subsidizing these windmills, no one would be building them. They couldn't afford to, and we couldn't afford to buy the energy. Truth, they aren't wind farms, they are simply tax avoidance farms. Every development project has a cost. Someone has to pay for that. Unfortunately, in this case, it is us. Our tax dollars are being spent to make renewable energy companies very wealthy. In Kansas, for example, there are currently 9 existing policies, acts, or programs that are used as incentives to get companies to build wind turbine complexes, such as one suggested here. The federal production tax credit is the first one. This is a tax exemption on all credits and profits for the first 10 years after the wind facility begins operation. If I were to use Gray County as an example for a wind farm, FPL, who is the owner of that, would avoid paying $70 million in the next 10-year span. Not bad profit considering they may donate a few $100,000 a year. The second one, the accelerated cost recovery depreciation, that is because we pay for 65% of their building cost through our tax dollars. But also beyond recovering those costs, the company would stand to shelter $190 million in profit. This list goes on and on with more tax breaks, grants, low interest loans, etc. And all we're going to do is be paying those costs in our taxes and our electric bills.
When the windmill company came in, they were going to produce all these jobs. They talked as though there would be hundreds of people working. They have talked about bringing in a plant to build windmill parts to service the windmills. They would employ thousands of people. They produce very few jobs.
Developers have said they're going to bring income to local businesses. We've shown you picture after picture of local quarries that come with the wind turbine construction, rock quarries, mobile cement plants. The average maintenance on these windmills is only 1 day per year. Very few permanent jobs are actually created. As for construction, they'll bring their own contractors from out of state for the big jobs. They'll use their own semi-drivers to bring them in. Typically, they even have a mobile trailer encampment for their construction crews to avoid motel costs. I guess the business income for Hayes will consist maybe of a few food purchases and some fuel sales. Typically, wind energy deals are not a very picture for the community. This one would be no different. Just like any deal, there are winners and there are losers. In this case, the wind company and those landowners that sell out are the winners, while the rest of the citizens would be considered losers. The leaseholder's share of profit is typically only around 3%, while the company stands to make around 90%, largely due to our government being so generous with subsidies and tax breaks. We have heard that taxes pay 65% of the capital cost, that windmills are depreciated so quickly that the company recovers its 35% investment in only 6 years. After that, their concern and their incentive to maintain those windmills is very small. This should be a big concern of yours and the whole community, because that will certainly retain our interest in their maintenance, because we'll have to live with them for the rest of our lives. The biggest losers are the taxpayers. We will be forced, because of our tax dollars, to subsidize these windmills, whether we want them or not, and electric customers will be forced to pay higher utility bills for this so-called green energy.
We understand very small amounts of local taxes, and they won't give us a concrete answer. They say, oh, it goes to the school district, oh, it goes to this. And when we also asked them why don't they increase and tax their revenues, they said, oh, well, they are movable objects. They're considered to be detachable. And the comment was made that, well, then my mobile home should not be taxed because my mobile home could be moved anywhere.
I mean, there's tax dollars that are derived, but no one is seeing that there's a lowering of taxes.
Health risks, noise pollution, decreased property values, wildlife destruction, loss of property tax dollars, and probably my personal biggest concern, the destruction of the scenic beauty that I have enjoyed since childhood living here, and that I pray I continue to see for the rest of my life. These are all very real costs that must be factored into any analysis of the benefits of wind energy generation. The lack of any tangible benefits for our community when all these real costs are considered is the reason I oppose the industrial development project so close to Hayes.
I think that the location of these are, you know, I think that's a little questionable. I think they need to be in areas that don't negatively impact people.
Everybody needs to be educated. If you've got a group of people, anyone that's going to be under 3,000 feet, anyone as far away as a mile or a mile and a half, needs to be educated on the negative aspects of windmills so that they can speak for themselves and stay together as a group and have a united front.
I think people need to take care of what they have and take care of the beauty of the environment around them instead of destroying it for the mighty dollar. I have lived in the country all of my life, and I wouldn't give it up for the world. I have not experienced anything like the turbines and the nuisances they have created in the past 2.5 years. I would not put this up, I would not want anyone else to have to put up with it. I think there should be stringent regulations and criteria put on the wind companies to have to adhere to stringent studies and guidelines regarding environmental policies and procedures, nuisances, noise levels, strobe lighting effects. They should have to adhere to it all.
And I've lived up here on this road half a mile from here all my life. It was definitely more peaceful before.
For those folks who are lucky enough, if you might say, to have one or many on their properties, they're very happy because they could be making $6,000, $7,000 a year per unit.
Their initial response to this is that, gee, they look great. After they see them several times, you know, come and go, maybe in the course of the day or the weekend, they start to look at them and they realize how ugly they truly are. There's no question about it.
But then again, if you talk with the people who are in between all of those, who get up in the morning and they look up and then they see the sea of windmills, you have a direct opposite reaction. You know, some of them are saying, well, it's maybe intriguing to you, but I have to look at them all the time. I'm getting no economic benefit. There's no electricity that's coming back to me as a person, or I'm getting no money from this. And aesthetically, I came here because I wanted to be away from everything else.
They want the right to be able to go over, under, or on my property anytime they want if I sign that contract. I ain't signing that contract. I don't care if I get nothing.
We sure didn't need to put up with this, did we? They're here. What are you gonna do now?
It's terrible and it should not happen. So if you people can go against it because it's not worth it. The eyesore, it's just not worth it.
I don't understand why they call them wind farms. There's nothing farming about this producing electricity. They're a big giant wind turbine.
I've been snowmobiling for like 25 years. This area has been destroyed landscape-wise by these windmills. As they add windmills, they will close trails. They will limit areas where we can ride.
We bought our property here in 1966. My husband came home from Vietnam at that time. We bought it for the view. We bought it intending to live here in our old age. And whenever I sit on my front porch now, I see those wind turbines spinning around. They don't make life any easier.
When the wind facility came in, the individuals were telling the community, oh, this is a fantastic facility. We're going to employ hundreds of people. It's going to create jobs for the area, opportunities for people, tourism. Looking at these things, they're not beautiful.
If the town had at least taken a straw vote so that people could have voted on whether they wanted the windmills or they don't, even if the vote didn't count for anything, at least the town would have known the way the townspeople felt. And I myself would have at least been able to have said, well, this is something the town people wanted, I guess I can live with it. But because there was no straw vote taken, nothing to indicate the way the townspeople felt, that's where we feel we've been shortchanged. Now the town wants to buy a new truck. We all have to vote on the new truck, but we couldn't vote on a project of this magnitude, which seems ridiculous.
When they started the blasting, at first it was maybe a little exciting in a strange sort of way. But then they hit the peak, the northern peak, and they literally blew it away.
There it is. Whoa!
They chose one section of the mountain that they felt for some reason they had to put a windmill there, and it wasn't conducive for putting a windmill there. So they blasted and blasted and just blew the side of the mountain off. And it happens to be the part of the mountain that we grew up on and we're used to hiking up and over. So it was very personal, and it felt like a violation. A family member was being hurt. So it was very difficult for our family to watch the mountain being just blown to bits, and with no way of ever being able to put that mountain back together. So knowing that the mountain that my father grew up on for 73 years unchanged was now forever changed.
I now live in town, but I used to live out on the farm, and I just, I feel real bad that anyone that has to have a home out there now with these turbines around them, I feel real bad and sorry for them. This whole thing has caused a lot of strife and a lot of hurt, divided the community, and turned friends and neighbors against each other. But it has also brought a lot of people together, trying to help each other. I am not saying that wind power is bad, but I don't think these wind turbines should be put so close to where people live. Thank you.